27 Bargaining Council were able to draft agreements to ensure that workers in their sectors will collectively receive the UIF COVID-19 tests. To defend collective bargaining, the CCA has also decided to apply for Section 77 notice in preparation for a planned protest action against the brutality of this ANC government. On the living wage campaign, we'll launch a solid and robust living wage campaign building on the foundation that was laid through the adoption of a legislated national minimum wage. We shall continue with our tried and tested approach of engaging in all different sides of power and mobilizing on mass base with the most assertive drive to build powerful social coalitions. On May Day, the May Day celebration format for the year 2021 will be finalized over the next coming months when a thorough assessment of the COVID-19 situation. But the priority of the Federation is to save life and not host any gathering that can act as a super spreader of the deadly COVID-19. No provincial congress will take place before May Day, and the May Day CC will ultimately determine the form and approach with July 2021 as the projected time. On the provincial congresses, we shall be convening our provincial congresses as per the constitutional application and the gender-based conference to focus on myriad of challenges that relate to gender inside and outside the workplace, but the final details will be concluded by the May 2021 CEC meeting. On solidarity and mass mobilization, we will also develop a mass mobilization program geared responding to the unfolding socio-economic crisis involving progressive mass-based organization, in particular in progressive civil society structures in general. Our main task is to unite the working class as a whole. On the 35th anniversary, the Cosatu CC adopted a program to celebrate Cosatu historic 35th anniversary. Provincial activities will be communicated at a later date. This will focus on the fostering intergenerational dialogue and also acknowledge stalwart who have built this giant organization, especially women. This will be a decentralized program that will take place mainly at the provincial level. On the Lily mine, the CEC also took a moment to remember the 3 workers who perished at the Lily mine in Mpumalanga. That was Pretin Kambule, Yvonne Mnisi, and Solomon Nyerende. It has been 5 years since the Lily mine tragedy happened, and their bodies are yet to be recovered. The Federation has also been at the forefront and committed towards the resolution of the impasse. The process of the business rescue has proven to be futile and not producing the desired outcome. Following our persistent effort of raising the plight of the workers and the affected families, a breakthrough was made, which led to the current owner, Vantage Goldfield, reviewing its decision of not continuing the operation in the mine. The mine will be reopened. There's an understanding that prior to the reopening, the potential bidder is obliged to pay the outstanding debt owed to the employees, that all former employees are reinstated, that all outstanding debt owed to and all other creditors are settled in full, that the retrieval processes for the container is resumed to last for 6 months. We note that the competing bidder, which Akwi Amanzi, led by Freddie Arenze, lodged a court application to litigate the reopening of the mine. Cosatu support the communities and the former employees who have signed a petition to oppose the litigation and fully support the reopening of the mine by Vantage Goldfields. On the health and national health insurance, the meeting has resolved to mobilize all Cosatu leaders, members, shop stewards and staff to take the vaccine. The affiliate of Cosatu will coordinate their work to develop sector-specific COVID-19 vaccine rollout promotion campaigns. The national office bearers have been mandated to meet with the People Vaccine Campaign to explore joint cooperation programs. The Federation is calling for more agents to be injected into the production and distribution of locally manufactured vaccine, including the utilization of already existing government infrastructure. The domestic trials and registration needed to be fast-tracked and expanded. We are calling for the high-level network engagement on how to expand and fast-track the sourcing procurement of the COVID-19 vaccine. The vaccine rollout campaign needed to be used as part of the process to implement the NHI, especially in the national procurement by government of the vaccine. We continue to mobilize for the immediate introduction of the NHI. We shall join forces with civil society and alliance to demand the addressing of the current two-tier health system, one for the rich and the powerful, and the other for the overwhelming poor majority. On solidarity with the public service workers, the CEC meeting declared its total support for public service workers and called on government to move immediately to resolve the dispute over the implementation of the third leg of Resolution 1 of 2018. The Federation will not allow a defeat of the public sector workers. We know the full political and economical implication if the public sector workers lose this battle. We denounce and reject the posture adopted by government and articulated by National Treasury. We call on government to respect the democratic institution and upon the unilateral imposition of a wage freeze for the next 3 years and engage union at the PSCBC about the way forward. The entire government continues to fail the poor South Africans by failing to provide the necessary leadership to resolve the public service stalemate. On gender-based violence, the CEC call upon government to move with speed to complete the process of the ratification of Convention 190. This will allow workers to hold the state accountable for its implementation and also translate into a national or domestic law which will help address the scourge of domestic violence and sexual harassment. The austerity-centered economic framework is also contributing to the gender-based violence because reports show that women are the most affected by the rate of unemployment. Government cannot claim to be fighting gender-based violence when women are forced to live their lives of brute survival by its economic policies. On legislation, in its reflection, the CEC has concluded that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed many gaps in the country's labor laws. The UIF needs to be modernized to cover typical workers and the changing nature of work. The compensation fund needs to be geared towards future pandemics. The Labor Relations Act needs to be amended to ensure employers are compelled to look for alternatives to retrenchment. The Occupational Health and Safety Act needs to afford workers the right to refuse dangerous work and to force employers to provide safe working environment. The CEC also calls on government to move with speed on the legislative front because too many progressive bills have been stuck with government bureaucracy for years. These include a raft of land reform and agricultural development bills, e.g. Section 25 Amendment, the expropriation fully exercise their rights and benefit from many progressive laws that represent hard-won victories. Such critical victories include the national minimum wage, parental and adoption leave, etc. On politics, the CEC deliberated at length about the local condition, the state of the working class, and the forces for the... Let me repeat this. The CEC deliberated at length about the local condition, the state of the working class, and the forces for and against the revolution, and what they mean for our strategy and what should be done. Regarding the domestic balances of forces, the CEC recognized that our revolution has reached a state of stagnation where the motive force is held at ransom by other class or social forces. Since Nasrec, the lack of discipline in the ANC has become worse, with leaders and members at all levels showing disdain for the rules of the organization. This makes a mockery of the Mangaung Conference that promised that this decade was going to be a decade of a cadre. The ANC is struggling to function as a unity organization. Since the Mangaung Conference, where the decade of a cadre was declared, we have seen more and more court intervention in political dispute. Political ineptitude and factionalism have created this dangerous reliance on courts. This in-depth discussion of the current political situation also assess what progress has been made in implementing the resolution of the ANC 2017 Nasrec Conference and the ANC 2019 Election Manifesto. The Nasrec Conference was significant because policy position which had long been advanced by Cosatu were adopted. The conference rejected the idea of a slim state and called for the state to define its role as and assert itself in the economy. The delegates lamented government's slow progress in addressing poverty and the deepening inequality. On paper, the Nasrec Conference and the 2019 Manifesto promise advances toward economic policy based on decent work, proposal for a new growth path, a new industrial policy, national health insurance, comprehensive social protection, comprehensive rural development strategy, and an assault on crime and corruption. But progress on these areas has been very mixed and on the whole disappointing. The centerpiece of a new economic policy, the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, has been adopted, but both the SON and the budget fail to provide details and time frames. The alliance is hobbled by government's inability to adopt overarching development strategy or growth path, or sufficiently supporting its industrial strategy, including on microeconomic policies, which are worsened by lack of decisive leadership. The budget that was tabled yesterday was a huge disappointment and another missed opportunity. The concrete impact for the working people since the outbreak of COVID has been devastating. The loss of close to 3 million jobs since the beginning of 2020 has led to the deepening poverty for many families. In the short term, no major recovery in job creation is likely to come out of the budget speech presented yesterday. The Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan is likely to be frustrated by a consecutive microeconomic policy framework that has not been adjusted to the new realities. As a result of all this, among our working class constituencies, there's a degree of despondency and frustration. There's a danger that the next quarter of the century, like the first, will belong to capital and not to the workers and the poor in economic terms. Big business continued to receive tax incentive despite no evidence presented to show that the previous ones have worked. The Alliance faced a serious crisis of legitimacy in the build-up to the local government election. The meeting instructed the national office bearers to convene a special CEC to focus on and deliberate at length on the matter of local government election and Cosatu posture in this regard. On the local government election, the planned special CEC meeting to discuss Cosatu position on its support for the ANC in the 2021 local government election is informed by the political reality on the ground. The CEC meeting acknowledged that there are major problems facing workers that will make it hard to convince workers to support the ANC during the upcoming election. Some of these challenges have left many workers feeling like they are being asked to vote against their own interest. Workers have already made it clear that their support for the ANC does not amount to a blank check and have previously refused to campaign or support candidates known to be corrupt or lazy just because they succeeded in manipulating the ANC internal process. The Federation will also convene a central committee to grapple with these big political issues. On the SACP, the CEC has resolved that we'll need to hold a bilateral meeting with the SACP to share with them to discuss the current situation. The question of the SACP and the state power remains unresolved. We believe that the condition will never be perfect for the party to answer this question. The Federation believes that the party should create this condition. In addition, we shall demand of our vanguard party, or of our vanguard part of the working class, to address some of its internal weaknesses. The party must lead us to build a platform on the struggle for socialism and must also help build the foundation of a socialist economy. Our assessment is that the NDR is at a crossroad, and therefore the role of the party has become even more important in developing political strategies that will rescue it and set it on the right path. The Cosatu NOB's bilateral engagement with the party will focus on the Africa Left Network to synergize with the left forces and coordinate all work already done and increase progress throughout the continent. On the ANC National General Council, we have noted the release of the ANC NGC draft discussion papers, but we believe that none of these papers go far enough in confronting the challenges the ANC is facing. The Cosatu CEC Political Commission will meet to discuss the ANC NGC discussion papers and formulate a program around which delegates can intervene. On the supremacy of the Constitution and the judicial transformation, the CEC affirmed the principle of the supremacy of the country's Constitution. We denounce any attack against the Constitution, and this should not be tolerated. While we admit that the Constitution is an artificial and imperfect document, it remains supreme. It remains the supreme guiding document that was democratically adopted by the people of this country. There are orderly ways of amending sections of the Constitution if people feel they are inadequate. Tolerating misguided and opportunistic attack on the Constitution has derailed many revolutions, plunged them into chaos, and even gave birth to populist dictatorship. While the need for a judicial transformation is real, we reject political opportunism by those who are tainted by the cancer of corruption. Cosatu will continue to push for a judicial transformation in a principled way. In a lawless country where rules do not apply, the working class would be the biggest losers. We need to take a stand in defense of the Constitution and affirm its supremacy in the governing of this country. On the international, first on Palestine, the CEC call upon Israel to adhere to the international obligation to immediately ensure COVID-19 vaccines are equal and fairly distributed to Palestinians living in the occupied West Bank and Gaza, where the battered and impoverished healthcare system are struggling to cope with the high caseload. This should include all Palestinian healthcare workers and prisoners. Noting the upcoming Israel Week on the 15th to the 21st March 2021, Cosatu will host and form part of multiple activities during that week, national and in provinces, to amplify the voice of the Palestinian struggle as we fight for their freedom. On Western Sahara, the CEC called upon the U.S. President Joe Biden to uplift the executive order signed by the former President Donald Trump, which recognized Moroccan sovereignty over the Western Sahara. Cosatu will also mount a campaign that the Kingdom of Morocco be taken out of the African Union, as it does not comply with the principle of the AU. On Swaziland, the CEC called upon SADC community to engage the Swazi King on the need for democratic processes in Swaziland and the freedom of association of trade union and all pro-democracy organizations. As a trade union in the SADC countries, we shall encourage our government to severe relations with Swaziland dictatorship. The Federation planned to organize a befitting memorial lecture in celebrating the life and the times of Comrade Mario Masuku, the late former president of Pudemo, as a true tribute to the great son of the Swazi people of Africa. On solidarity campaign in general, the CEC further reaffirmed all Cosatu Congress resolution on solidarity with Swaziland, Palestine, Western Sahara, Cuba, Zimbabwe, extending solidarity with the people of north of Mozambique. On Mozambique itself, Cosatu is deeply worried about the situation of the Islamic insurgents in the northern province of Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. The brutality that is taking place there is unacceptable, and we call upon SADC and the people of the region to act decisively in taking steps to protect the people from the brutality happening there. On building the African trade union movement, the Federation plans to develop a new strategy to revive the African trade union movement, as it is weak, and Cosatu has a central role to play in building that force of workers' power on the continent. On Tanzania, we express our total support for the union in Tanzania and calling for the vaccine, since the workers on the front lines are dying, while the president there is on a denial. Thank you, Comrade Stephen.
Thank you, Mopalo. President, this is the summary of the outcomes of the Central Executive Committee meetings that took place over the last 2 days. I do believe it's a very short, clear statement, but I'm not going to make assumptions. Let's find out if there are any clarification. If none, we can go to the meeting. If we do have, let's hope that it's not going to more than one round. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Zianda Ngogo from Newsroom Africa. My question to the leadership is surrounding the judiciary and what you've said about political opportunism. By who? And I'm asking you to be specific because I would like to put it to you that maybe don't you think you should be specific in isolating the specific individuals or organizations that are actually bringing the judiciary to distribute so as to prove that this is an exceptional circumstance and not the norm? Why aren't you actually coming out and being specific about who is actually waging this political opportunism. Thank you.
Thank you, Avi.